couple of topics that you and I had talked about. You gave me a list, which is great. I never have a list to usually walk around, walk through or talk about. But given this year, given everything that people are going through, the job changes, the circumstance changes, the geopolitical changes, it's exhaustive, right? Yeah. So one of the things I've been focusing in on with every single person that's been on here so far, or at least in this series, Ed Henry, notwithstanding, we talked about pigs and Neuralink, which it's a completely divergent topic, which is fun, has been around community. And so a lot of communities that we find ourselves in, like obviously you and I met through a startup community, Alistair, and the phenomenal work he's doing at Lineup Conf. And obviously he's doing something else in October, which I get to talk about with him shortly. We've been involved in tech. We have that kind of tech mindedness, and that ecosystem tends to be very incestuous, right? It tends to be very insular, and not a lot of, we like to have a lot of people come in, but not a lot of people ever escape it. So to a certain extent, I think one of the things that becomes important is, how does that ecosystem evolve now that this world is kind of sucked in and trying to make sense of everything in your mind? And shoot from the hip. Tell me what's going on in your head. How do we become, well, let's say, more inclusive, more diverse, and how do we start to bridge the gap between tech and all these different, kind of surrounding or tangential areas that we could have effect on? I know it's a large topic, so chew on what you want.
Well, to be fair, tech sort of goes into everything now, doesn't it? I suppose it has to be part of several. You've got an ecosystem, almost has like sub ecosystem, doesn't it? But to be fair, they should all be sort of singing from the same hymn sheet, and they should all be learning from each other. So you've got really, you've got loads of elements of what an ecosystem is. So you've got it's really going back to sort of the basics. You've got, internally, you've got you've got ideas, inventions, research. You've got businesses at various stages. So you've got the startups, you've got the growth businesses, you've got the zebras, you've got the unicorns. And zebras is a new one, actually.
Really?
You've got the entrepreneurs, you've got investors, you've got mentors, you've got advisors, and then you've got loads of other things outside of that, which are all part of it. Universities, for example. I used to be, I don't know why, but I was massively intimidated by universities until I started engaging with them and working with them. Probably because I didn't go to university until I was 44. So I always had this thing like, oh God, I haven't got a degree. But to be fair, it hadn't stopped me. I think universities play a really big part in any ecosystem, whether it's tech or other, just for lots of different reasons. Access to knowledge transfer, great talent, research, financials as well, so funding opportunities. And I really think that any really good ecosystem has to be inclusive, because otherwise, it doesn't work properly. I'm based in Manchester. I'm part of lots of different ecosystems. I co-founded something called Tech North Advocates about 4 years ago, which is part of something that's now global. So it started initially in London by a guy called Russ Shaw, an American who is really passionate about tech in London, and he set up Tech London Advocates, and it's just sort of grown from there. So there's about 10,000 people across the world in that ecosystem who really simply are just there to support each other. It's there's no sort of hidden agenda. It's just really being there to support other organisations and other people. And the great thing is that little old Naomi in Manchester has access to this much wider network. And that again, going back to, it makes me feel inclusive to be part of that. In Manchester, there's lots of different, I would say, I probably get bashed for saying this, but that there are silos. There's probably silos in the ecosystems where you are.
Yep.
And I think the only way that they work well is if they collaborate. So, you know, people support and help each other. And also, you know, you think about, you know, I think it also is a mindset as well. I work with a lot of startups, growth businesses, you know, businesses that want to solve problems. So I help them innovate, usually sort of doing that through design sprints to solve problems. You know, the methodology of what a design sprint is. And it's really interesting for me. I can come into anywhere, and quite clearly, just by having a conversation with a people and people talking about what they're doing, is I can see straight away connections within the networks that I have. And that's just something that is just, I suppose, it's just in my head. It's just the way that my brain works.
Sure.
And there's not a lot of people that are like that. I think people, you know, there's a couple of people I know just off the top of my head, again, in the UK, that are brilliant at it. So a guy called Paul Lancaster, who is based up in Newcastle, guy called Stuart Clark in Leeds. There's a woman called Sarah Tulip, she's also Leeds based. Pete Mills, Yorkshire based. There's also, again, Rush Shaw, who I mentioned, in London. Also a really another guy called Ollie. Oh God, I've forgotten his surname. I'll find it in a sec. Again, just really fantastic people who can just see straight away. It's almost like the Matrix, you know, where you can sort
Sure.
of, okay, this is how this can fit in, and this is how these people could work together. And I do think, again, if you want inclusivity, you also have to be collaborative.
Sure. So going back to your comment you made about university, which I'm fascinated by. Obviously, I've started my side trek into higher education as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of folks that I've met that haven't, you know, let's say, been formally trained through university systems or education have said things very, very similar to you. You thought you were at a disadvantage until.
Yeah.
You know, what's that perspective like? I mean, again, I did my undergraduate, I did my, you know, graduate degree, and, you know, been blessed to be able to do that. And it certainly, I think, has informed my worldview, especially when it comes to sociological things. Not necessarily technical, because I don't have technical degrees. So what was it about, you know, coming back to education? Maybe that's the perspective we should have. Coming back to education, you know, having been through a career or having been through several jobs, that allowed you to see the value of it, number one, the value of education, but also that made you realize that all was not for naught. You know, what you did and how you chose to live your life in that intersectional period of time, right, was extremely valuable. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I was not particularly academic at school. I was probably, I was bored. You know, I'm not, I'm a very visual learner. So for me, I suppose traditional education just didn't really work. It didn't, you know, it's funny actually, because my youngest, I've got two daughters. One is 17 and one is 15. And my youngest, Elizabeth, is very, very similar to me. You know, she can go into a room, she can talk to anybody. She did a TEDx talk in America with me when she was 11. But she's not particularly, you know, she'll pass her exams. She may want to go to university, I'm not sure. And I think sometimes, you know, going in as a mature student, for me, it was always about, I think I'd been challenged about not having a degree in the past. I remember, this is really sad actually. I remember I had, this is going off on a tangent now. Have you ever heard of emotional freedom technique? EFT, it's tapping. So you like tap.
Heard of it.
Yeah. So I had a friend of mine who was learning how to do it, and she needed some guinea pigs. So I was a guinea pig, and it was probably about, God, it must have been 13 years ago now. It was when I first started doing bits and pieces of speaking. I used to get really, really nervous. And so she did this tapping thing on me, and she said, "Oh, have you got anything else?" And I said, "Well, actually, yeah, I've got a bit of a, it's not a chip on my shoulder. I don't know what it was, but it was like I felt really inadequate because I didn't have a degree." And she sort of, she asked me all these questions, and it turns out it stems from, I had this ex-boyfriend who had like a first class honours degree, and he was a bit of a, excuse my French, a bit of a twat. And he asked me to do my 12 times tables once, and I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Do you?" Yeah, and I think I'd had this raging 12 times table thing in my head, and
Oh
that's
God.
probably. And this, after we'd done this thing, this woman at the end of the session, she was like, "Oh my God, that's the worst thing I've ever heard."
I can
So
do 12 times 12. I mean, that's 144, right? I think that's
yeah.
about the only thing I can do in that.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so when I started doing things with the universities probably about 12 years ago, and you know, I just sort of doing like guest talks and things like that, just based on my experience, and then started getting involved in more and more stuff. I set up a youth enterprise employability company with two guys, and we worked with quite a few universities, and it was to bridge the gap between education, employment, and enterprise. And it was all around entrepreneurial thinking. And the more and more I started working with universities, the more I fell in love with them. And I think really that there's not always an obvious front door with a university. So a lot of businesses don't bother because they give up because it's so difficult to navigate unless you know somebody. And I went to, I did a talk at a social media conference in 2014, and there was an academic there who he was on a panel that I was on, and somebody in the audience had asked a question, and they basically said, "Do I need a degree to do digital marketing?" And I was like, "Hell no, I don't think you do." I said, "I think you know, if you're good at communication, you can do this, this, and this, and you don't need to have a degree to be a digital marketer." So this academic, he grabbed me just before I was leaving. He said, "I'd love to get you to think in an academic way." And I was like, "Why?" I said, "I can't go to university. I've not even got any A levels." Um, and I always thought it would never be an option for me. And he was like, "Look, I want to send you some information." He gave me his card. And anyway, in 2015, I started a digital marketing communication, a master's in digital marketing communications. So I skipped the undergraduate, the graduate, and went straight to doing a master's. So I was like, you know, I remember ringing up my sister and saying to her, I'm starting a master's. I'm starting going to university. And it was very part-time, so it fitted in with the freelancing that I was doing.
Sure.
There was people from all over this world, the world, who came on this course. So it was like you would actually go in person for the weekend once every 3 months, and then you would get work in between. I lasted a year. Basically, I cannot write in an academic way. I can only write sort of more opinion-based type things, and that's, you know, I basically said to him, "Look, what do I have to do to get to wear a hat and a gown and graduate so I can have a party?" And they said, "Look, you just got to do this many assignments, and that's it. You're good to go." And you know what? I ended up with a postgraduate certificate, which I'm deeply proud about. And you know, hilariously, another university I've been working with for years gave me an honorary fellowship the year after. And now I am chair of the industry advisory board at the University of Salford Business School. So hey ho to my whole sort of, I suppose it's like the imposter syndrome that I have. That's probably the thing that's sitting on my shoulder. But yeah, I think for me, universities are amazing places. And I always encourage businesses to engage with their local university for many, many reasons. One of the reasons that actually we have the advisory board, industry advisory board at the University of Salford Business School, is so we can make sure that the students are employment ready when they leave, and so that the curriculum is really based on what industry wants. And I think that's really important.
Definitely. I mean, we see kind of, even talking about current events, we see
Yeah.
kind of, I obviously spent a lot of time talking to my Irish peers. So leaving certs was a big thing, right? The inability to complete those, or the fact that they, were required or whatever. So a lot of those things, and I think American education tends to be a little bit, you know, wishy-washy with this as well. There's such an emphasis of going directly from, your high school or your primary education into secondary level education, right? You're not going to get a job unless you go to university. You're not going to get a job unless you do this. And I think there's a subtle change that's been happening now that people realize, well, number one, the forcing function is most people are not going to physical university anymore. They're consuming things in different ways, right? And so we're seeing that change in the shaping of education in a way that I don't think anybody was prepared for, honestly. It just seems to be education's reacting very, very, is being very reactionary because they have to, not because they want to be, right?
Yeah.
There's the four walls of my institution no longer are sacred.
Yeah.
I can, we've always been able to access MIT's material online, right? Certain things have been provided as they go on. So when you look at that kind of landscape now, yes, and congratulations on your post-grad, certificate and everything. I'll virtual pat on the shoulder for you.
Thanks.
And we had our party back in March. So what do you see, especially, given the age of your daughters, right? My daughter's, my oldest daughter is, second year in high school now. And so she's going to be looking at, post high school education. Do you see a change in how, adolescents, children, kids, whatever you want to call them, are approaching the workforce now? Is there room in that middle space? I'm now 18 years old. I'm ready to go in, where maybe internships and apprenticeships become more important as a way of going into education, or is there something different there for you?
Well, I've done a lot of stuff with young people, especially around entrepreneurial thinking and digital skills for years. I think, just based on my experience, again, it depends on where the schools are, etc. Is you'll have a lot of it's to do with the parents. So you'll get perhaps first generation parents that may have gone to university that assume that is the path that their kids should go to. Whether that child, whatever they want to do, is, it's just about having a degree. Okay. Now, there's always been apprenticeships in the UK. Now they have higher level degree apprenticeships. So basically, it's very similar to an apprenticeship. You still get paid an amount of money, but you actually get to do a degree, and the employer pays for you to be able to do that. It's a really great option, especially for young people that don't want to get into really big debt, because obviously the degree is paid for. They just do it at a slower pace, but they're working at the same time. I think, again, it really depends on, certainly with, like, my eldest daughter went to a grammar school, and I would say 99% of the kids that go to that grammar school, their destination will be university. And that's not always because that's what they want to do. It's sometimes because it's what the parents want to do. So you've got to educate the parents just as much as the kids. But it's also, as well, I think the schools, again, certain schools in certain areas are almost, it's like, it's a big thing for them to say, oh yeah, 99% of our kids go to university. That's why this is a great school to go to. I think apprenticeships are a really fantastic route for young people. And then also, as well, thinking about, I've seen more and more people going to university at a much later age. I know I've got several friends that didn't go to university until their 30s. To become, one of them was a physiotherapist, the other one became a chiropractor. They didn't decide what they wanted to do until they were much older. And again, I think a lot of young people think that there is a linear path to your career.
Yeah.
Most people have multiple careers now. So they go off on different tangents, and you learn from every different job.
It's kind of incredible. And I think, something you talked about just momentarily, touch on, parents being a certain driver of that, from personal experience, my father, really, really emphasized the need for education in our family.
Yeah.
So I did college, I did, my master's degree. And that was something that, and looking back in my wise age now, it was certainly something that was an expectation from him. It was something that he wanted. It was something that I did to accede to his wishes, right? And it was something that gratefully was, covered and paid for. And, I was afforded that opportunity where a lot of folks are not able to do it. I was able to emerge from it relatively debt free. My brother, on the other hand, who is a brilliant, brilliant software engineer, I think he did a semester of, undergraduate learning, and decided it wasn't for him. But his entrepreneurial spirit took over, from a very young age. He was, my brother Danny would probably kill me for saying this, but I think it started when he was like 10 years old. And he's been doing it ever since, so his idea of freelancing and consultant level work. I mean, I read his stuff that he does on LinkedIn now, and I'm blown away by that. So there's that different approach to stuff. We're both successful as far as the world would determine us to be successful, but wildly different paths and wildly different emphases, all right, on those training paths and those education. And now, in my 40s, I'm going back and I'm, working on a doctoral degree on something that I'm passionate about. But I think that age and that perspective, like you talked about, you going back to university at, the wise old age of 44, that perspective that you brought into that cohort and into that group of folks, I think it's an interesting dichotomy, right? You have experience leading education versus education leading experience. And, so I'm always curious about how that represents itself ultimately in the end. So your story is incredible from that perspective. I think I also recognize that people are choosing to do things later in life. I had a financial advisor at one point tell me, he goes, if I had to do things, differently, I wouldn't have gone directly from, grammar school into university. I would have taken the time to go and I won't say anything impolite, but to screw around and figure out what I wanted to do. Get some miles under my belt, right? And I experienced life to a certain extent. I don't know if that resonates with you a lot, but I love also the concept of learning while you work.
I think so. But also something else has just come into my head as well. That so I was part of delivery team for digital skills in Greater Manchester for there's a program called Go Digital that the Greater Manchester Combined Authority did, and it was all about encouraging young people to think about roles in the tech digital space when they so as them to think about subjects to pick, but also to think about careers, because there's lots of tech companies coming into Manchester. We need to keep up with the skills, so you need to encourage young people to think about it. Now I did all the assemblies, so I did about 50 assemblies, and in all the assemblies I talked to the kids about things that they probably wouldn't usually think about. So most people think careers in the tech sector, it's all about coding. And I would say to them, well, actually, we need people who are really good at communicating. So who here, stick your hand up if you get told off for talking in class. Like, we need people like you, but you also need to listen as well. We also need creative people. We also need people that can solve problems. So creative problem solving skills are the number one career skill that you need for the world of work now. And going back to what you said before about your brother and this entrepreneurial streak, I think I think that I have a streak. Whether it's, I don't like the word entrepreneur. It's for me, it's like people say it, and I'm like, I'm not an entrepreneur. But then I suppose I assume that I would think, okay, that's you know, I think you can have entrepreneurial thinking. So entrepreneurs for me is like somebody who's like, you know, Jeff Bezos or someone like that. But I do think that entrepreneurial thinking will stand you in good stead for pretty much any and every job. I think that's the really, really key. And again, it's that creative problem solving skills and having the ability to think on your feet, and it's a lot of it's to do with common sense as well. I think common sense stands a lot of, you know, you can be the cleverest person in the world, but you might not have any common sense.
Yeah. Well, it strikes a lot of us, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think, again, age begetting wisdom.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
being able to look
yeah,
back and say, hey, you know, listen, what I thought was, you know, I was, you know, misconstruing intelligence for wisdom, or
yeah,
book learning,
yeah,
if you will, or education for wisdom. And
yeah,
those two couldn't be further from each other at some points, right? You know,
yeah,
you know, master of none, but, you know, knowledgeable about many, you know, or an inch deep and a mile wide, you know, those
yeah, yeah, yeah,
type of phrases kind of roll off the tongue. But you're right. And that common sense becomes, you know, I learned I tried starting my own consultancy, and I think I ran it for about 5 years, and it was great. I had a lot of fun.
yeah,
What I didn't have fun with was the money,
yeah, me
because
too.
yeah, you know, it
Yeah,
strikes us all. I mean, I had somebody say to me, you know, the first thing that I would ever recommend if you're going to start your own business is take a basic accounting class, because, you know,
yeah,
that's education that begets wisdom. It's
yeah,
one of those situations
yeah,
where if you're not good with money, you're going to end up
yeah,
living hand to mouth. You're not going to ever find the advantage in doing it. And we
yeah,
can talk about rampant capitalism or late stage capitalism all we want to, and that's a whole different topic for another
yeah,
time. But some of these things that you learn in the course of it, I had to fail at running my own consultancy, fail relatively speaking, to learn that I
yeah,
needed to focus
absolutely.
a lot more energy on
Yeah,
understanding the flow of
yeah,
funds through my business. And so some of these things I've come along with are, again, my degrees are in psychology and clinical counseling, and
yeah,
I'm in tech, in
yeah,
marketing, no less, right now for a very large international company. And I sit there and laugh. I'm like, how did I end up here? But
yeah.
like you're saying, a lot of, you know, I would be the kid I got in trouble for talking too much, but I
You
would
say
also be,
I was,
I can't imagine that at all.
yeah, yeah. I was the kid that got told off for talking too much, being fun, laughing too. I love school,
Yeah,
but for the crack.
yeah, yeah,
Like, you know,
precisely.
and also as well, I think it also depends on the teachers that you have as well.
Sure.
You know, I didn't have, actually I had one teacher who was really inspirational and saw something in me, and I was the only girl in my high school that took metalwork as an exam subject. So metalwork, as it was there, was like, I suppose it's like design and technology, but it was like using metal to
Yeah.
make things. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And he said to me, because where I was brought up in Farnborough, and in Farnborough they have a very famous air show there.
Yes.
And they also have like, you know, let's just say there's a plane crash, that's where plane crashes go, and they find out how the plane crashed and all that
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff. And he said to me, he said, do you know what? You could be an engineer, right? And
Uh-huh.
I was like, I came home from school and I said to my mum, my teacher said that I could be an engineer. And I was like, you know, nobody had ever said anything nice like that before. And then we had the summer holidays. And then for the second year, he left. He left. And I was devastated. And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to do it anymore. So I did drama instead. But do you know what? He was like one of the only teachers that actually saw something in me, apart from, you know, like baby school teachers.
Sure.
And that's really sad. That's really sad. So, you know, the stuff that I've done with kids, again, I've sort of done it on a freelance basis for a number of different organisations and my own. I've actually gone in and there's a company called Digital Inc. And it's all about being inclusive for digital, but also about helping young people how to come up with digital solutions. And generally they go into a school for a week, they work with a group of 20 kids, and at the end of the week they have an MVP for a digital product, they have a website, they have social channels, they have a blog with content on it, the lot,
Mm-hmm.
in a week. And it's the most incredible thing that I've done. I've met so many incredible kids doing it. And it always astounds me when the teachers say, do you know what, they actually love coming into school now because they're doing something that's fun and interesting, and is using, because we also do this thing at the beginning of the sessions called IMA. So it's about identifying, modifying and adapting what your behavior, your communication style is. So we have there's yellow, green, blue and red. It's like assertive people, non-assertive, open,
Sure,
and closed
sure.
people. And it's really great. We always make sure that there's a mix of different kids, and we get kids that haven't usually worked together, but just finding out, skills that they didn't think that they had is just amazing. So I always, as an adult, I always, and I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing because I'm still learning, but I always find the best things out of people. Find out what their sweet spot is, if you know what I mean. And that all comes from asking really good questions. And again, this is another skill. Actually, I don't think that schools encourage enough, because actually when you do ask questions, you get told off for putting your hand up.
Yeah.
And being inquisitive is a really, really good skill.
I would hope it is. And I think there's a huge thing, we call it Socratic learning. Like we ask a lot of questions and learn by doing that. I don't know how many situations I managed to bluff my way through just by asking questions, because it makes me appear smart.
Yeah.
This conversation notwithstanding. I mean, being able to take the piss out of yourself is also pretty fun too.
Yeah, definitely. Trust me, definitely for me.
Yeah.
I always ask. I'm. Do you know what my friends have said to me? You almost interview people, and I just can't help it because I'm genuinely interested in people. Yeah. It's not because I'm nosy. I'm just interested, and that's it. I'm interested in how people got to where they are, and their career paths and what they like doing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it, because actually it's always stood me in good stead. And interestingly, I read a really good article. I'm just going to see if I can find it quickly for you now. And it was all about making your own luck.
Yep.
But also based on situations. So, I've said yes to so many things. In my sort of, because I've had sort of a couple of career iterations. So I went from the travel industry to recruitment, and then going from recruitment to events, and then doing the whole tech thing. Yep. And it's just, again, going back to what I said before, is about having, lots of different types of careers. But God, you know what? I don't even know what I'm talking about now, because I'm trying to find this bloody thing.
While you're looking for that, I can certainly bolster academically. I can bolster your argument. So I was reading something for part of my research in the maker community. So maker community within a disadvantaged area or a marginalized community. Yeah. And one of the things that they reinforced through this study was done in Detroit and North Carolina, or Michigan and North Carolina, I should say, was that by enabling kids, through a community, community focus, to problem solve, not necessarily giving them the answers, because I think a lot of times we want to, because we are those type of people, especially parents. Giving them the ability to problem solve and to find things that was in their community, their local geographic community, as it were, things that they could solve and they could solve for. I think one of them was talking about heated bus seats and versus heated bus stops, right? Because one of the children's moms was a bus driver and noticed that, and when winter hit, it was terrible on how to get more people to use this. So being able to go in there and focus, and not giving them the answers, but giving them enough, information, letting them problem solve, and then reinforcing it, just like that metalwork, teacher gave you, that those words became the reinforcement of your ideals, right? It became your excitement, became that kind of energy that carried you through. And I think a lot of that, even going back to some of the stuff we talked about early on, the ability for anyone to come in and encourage and lift up and just bolster by saying, you can do this, whether through an education frame or through a social frame or through, an entrepreneurial frame, as much as that word kind of means a lot of different things to different people. You and I have been involved in some of the startup communities, obviously in Northern Ireland, in the UK and Ireland at large. and being able to see kind of that passion and purpose. It's thinking and going to that idea and having great people like yourself, Chris McClellan, Alistair
Yeah.
Camera, like Mary McKenna, a great
Yeah. Yeah.
example
Oh,
as
I
well.
love her.
And
Yeah.
and yourself, coming alongside and saying, hey, listen, you can do this. Think
Mm.
about those problems. Think about them
Yeah.
constructively. Sure, there's some money on the line. Yeah,
Yeah.
money. You got to fund it somehow. But being able to push through and kind of look at those problems and being able to creatively solve it. I think that's, it's important. It's something that hopefully universities, education in general, it's
Yeah.
starting even from grammar school all the way back up,
Yeah.
should be encouraging children to do that, should be encouraging young adults to do that, should be encouraging mid-career folks to do that.
Yeah.
What are the
Well,
problems that you're finding that you can go and challenge and change?
well, this is also, it's about, I'm fascinated by entrepreneurship as well. I went to this really fantastic conference in Paris when was it? I think it was 2014. And it was very exciting because I got the train down from Manchester to London, and then we got the train from St Pancras to Paris. And we met a can-can girl on the train called Chloe, who was from Blackpool. She was a can-can girl. So that was the very exciting bit. And we were going to this entrepreneurship conference, and they had like all these really cool people from all over the world there talking about programs within their businesses and also their organizations. So the US government has an entrepreneurship program. I don't know whether they've got it anymore because of what's his face, but they've probably got rid of it. But they have an entrepreneurship program. There was this guy from the military who again, he was talking about this how they would talk to the people on the front line. And again, it's the same as if you had a factory. So Nike, for example, or Nike, or however you call it. They were talking about a story about they had somebody who was working on the factory floor, and he said, I would like us to develop trainers that I can buy. Mm-hmm. So he helped them design a pair of trainers that were more reasonably priced because he put up his hand and put himself forward for it. And I think more and more companies need to think about doing this for many reasons. It gives the employees a sense of purpose, and makes them feel like they are always like the owners of the business, or even
invested
they
in
have,
it.
they invested, they take some ownership. And I'm always fascinated also by human-centered design. So I'm involved with an amazing organization called Future Everything, who basically they're an arts organization, but they solve problems and do create stuff through tech and digital. And they always start with having conversations with local communities, and they're just absolutely fantastic. So again, it's like going back to what you said before about the young kids and getting them to solve problems. It's also about get communities. And again, this is why I love, I did the Jake Knapp, oh God, what's it called? AJ Smart course during lockdown. It's basically AJ Smart. They have a design sprint masterclass thing that you can do over the course of a number of weeks. And it really sort of, I've been doing them for years, but this was sort of giving me a methodology to sort of use again and again. And you can actually use it for pretty much anything and everything. But kids and communities need to know how to do this, and also organizations. The biggest problem that I see with the companies that I work in is communication within the company. Yeah. They don't talk to each other. And it's like, again, going back to our original subject, which was the ecosystems, unless conversations happen, or sometimes are facilitated, stuff doesn't happen. Yep. But going back to this article, it was called, it was about I've sent you the link to it. It was about the serendipity mindset, so how to make your own luck, and seeing meaning in the unexpected can help turn mistakes into opportunities. Nice. A really, really interesting.
I'm gonna have to read it.
Yeah, you should. It's a really interesting read, and actually, I would say just a lot of the things that I've been involved in has just been purely by bumping into the right person at the right time, or because something's cocked up, and
Yep.
and I think, one thing I will say, in the UK, we're not very good at the word failure and learning from it. And I think people need to talk more about their failures. There's a great concept similar to sort of like TEDx called fuck up nights, where people
Nice.
talk. Google it if you don't know about it.
Yeah.
And people just basically talk about their fuck ups.
Yeah.
Talk about what they've learned, and it's just very, very cool.
I sense, and given our time, I sense that's a great topic for next time. We can talk about fuck up nights or learning through failure.
Yeah, definitely.
Naomi, it's been great to have you on. I really appreciate this. We've certainly we've started from a very large pool of thought and worked our way down into education, which I think is incredibly valuable, especially as kids are returning to school and we see universities kicking off and everything that's going on here, and hopefully that will spur some thought. So I really appreciate your time this morning.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna do this again. I'm just warning you ahead of time. We're gonna do this conversation again, and we're gonna do it differently with different topics. That's what I mean. Differently, whatever. Next time, maybe in a pub. We'll see.
Yeah, that would be good.
But thank you for your time. Thank you for
Pleasure.
the work that you do. I have a feeling that we're going to be working together again, probably very shortly, depending on the people that we know and are involved with in the startup community. All right. Anyway, thank you for your time. I look forward to our next conversation. And there we go.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.